The thing is, like, it's recording this whole thing, so I can
Oh,
just
that's
cut
good.
this out.
I think we're good on Twitch.
All right.
Twitch is live. Testing, testing.
It should be good.
Yeah, you sound fine on Twitch. Um, YouTube, is the link different?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. I'll just add it to the tweet. It's a different link. Alrighty.
I don't know where we were.
Talking about this, and you said the phase stuff was recorded, right? So we don't gotta repeat that.
No, you're good.
Okay. Um. So getting back to the discussion that you were having, I think the way I look at this, you did a good job illustrating all the stats and stuff of the current players. I do think, we have to give flowers to Slasher in terms of just the longevity of how good his teams have been at Search and Destroy. And again, we were talking about the eras and stuff. He did it in the CWL era with Envy. He was a part of that AW team that won with aches and the stitches in his hand and all that. And even as recently as like Atlanta Phase, like it helps when you're playing with those three guys that we illustrated the stats for. But like they're a pretty good search team, all things considered. You got to give Illy some of his flowers too, because even as recently as last year, we talked about how good that Seattle Surge team was at Search, and he was a big part of that. Um, but I think, big picture conversation, I do think at the end of the day, guys like Simp, Abizi, Celium, if we're talking strictly players in the CDL, they are going to be at the top of a lot of lists in terms of who the best S&D players are. I think if we go, you know, I know for me personally, my favorite search and destroy player of all time was Fizzer. Shout out Fizz. He was the guy who, I still remember watching Nade spot videos and stuff from him back in the OG MW3. He was my guy who really got me into uh, you know, grinding competitive S&D so many years ago. So I have to give him a shout out at least in consideration there. And then even a guy like Tupac, like if we're talking about people
Mm-hmm.
who weren't in the CDL, like I don't know the exact numbers because I've never done anything on CMG. But as far as I'm aware, he's like one of the top earners on CMG for S&D tournaments and stuff in COD. So his name has to be thrown in the conversation, at least in terms of people who, obviously he's coached in the CDL, but he never actually played in the CDL. So if we're talking about top S&D players who never quite made it, I know he's got to be considered too. And he was. I might not be 100% accurate here, but I'm pretty sure like a BZ got his start. Not necessarily his start, but he really started to come into his own playing S&D with Tupac in MWR Modern Warfare Remastered, um, if I remember correctly. And then he had that little stint with um, E6, which would have been in
Order 2, I think.
World War II. Yes, because then it goes to Black Ops 4, and that's when he's on a United. So yeah. Um, Long story short, I think these conversations are always fun, especially when you can go back to guys like Fizz and you know look at the current era. I still like to think one thing that I've thought about as long as some couple years ago is like I think Fizz would have been an incredible S&D coach in the CDL in today's era. It would have been cool to see. Um, unfortunately, that's not the case. But yeah, like you think of a guy like Slasher, doing what he's been doing for so many years. You have to give him some props there, and even Illy. Like Illy hasn't done it necessarily as long as Slasher at the pro level, but like you combine like that CMG stuff and his online S&D play with some of his accolades in the CDL era, you can make a case, but I do think it's probably similar to like a lot of the top 10 lists for all time uh, players, the Simp, Abizi, Cell, those Atlanta Phase boys and that trio in particular. They're going to be at the top of a lot of lists when it's in terms of just basically everything when it comes to competitive COD.
One last thing I'll say about this topic is what the future looks like for S&D, because even players like Illy and Shotzi and Cell, they came up in an era in which they played, UMG or CMG or GB. They played in these tournaments online, and it was kind of plentiful. Like they could pretty much grind out those tournaments day after day and get better at it. There isn't a GB anymore. Obviously, UMG hasn't been a thing in a while. I don't know what like the state of like how active people are on CMG at this current time, but it seems like S&D interest in general has never been lower, because what it used to be is players would either before they got into competitive be like S&D stars, or after they retired or were just done competing, they would then transition into being S&D streamers. Like we saw that with like Nick Merks, for example. Like he kind of blew up in Call of Duty by playing S&D tournaments. And then he obviously went on to like greater success with like Warzone and Fortnite and like Apex Legends and that stuff. Like Tim the Tatman was also a Call of Duty like S&D streamer, or like he wasn't like S&D tournaments as maybe as aggressive as like Nick Merks was, but like it was in that same realm. And someone like Fizzerp was like making his living on just grinding S&D tournaments and winning them, and that's what like Ilya and Shotzi were doing before they got in the CDL. I kind of wonder what it's going to be like for these players coming up now, where they don't even have a GB, which is, not to say that people were always playing GBs, like especially in the later years, because it became more of a wager mentality than like, let's just play these kind of like seemingly meaningless like GB points matches. But at the same time, like that's a good barrier, or that's a good way to enter into the scene for a lot of people, is to create a Game Battles account and start playing GBs against people they don't know, losing maybe a lot, and then just getting better and improving that record. I mean, you're like, I don't know when you created your GB account, but it was well over a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago.
Oh, 9.
Yeah, so literally over 15 years ago. And you went through that same kind of evolution of like, you play a lot, you get better. There might be a ceiling for a lot of these guys. They might find out that they're not going to be like pro COD players or whatever, but that's just not even there anymore. So I kind of worry about that. And now I think the equivalent right now is Warzone. Like people that, don't have like this competitive experience yet, or have already done that and don't want to go back, they just play Warzone. And obviously that's not great for competitive. Like they don't translate nearly as well. Like as much as Warzone players like to think that they're better than current CDL players, like even if that's true, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a great Warzone player that your skills can actually translate in any sense to the CDL, or vice versa. Even though I do think that it probably works better if you go CDL to Warzone, just my opinion. But yeah, I don't know what the future is. I did see that Paul X came out of retirement. I don't know if you saw that. So that was obviously something this year where he said he was retiring, that he was going to go to Warzone and be a streamer, and now he's coming back to competitive. And I believe he just said like, he didn't want to like give up on his like, whatever he had left, which I thought it was weird that he retired. But I'm happy to see him back. Hopefully he can, do something in challengers and kind of work his way back up. But yeah, I don't know if you had anything else on the S&D stuff.
I'll just say in terms of what you're talking about of, the outlook of the future, the S&D scene and stuff. I definitely, it's it's not as bright as it once was, but I will say, maybe just to play devil's advocate, we talked about it as early as this last season, maybe even a couple seasons ago. Um, I don't think it was really ever really like a serious topic in terms of the game modes in the CDL as until like this past off season. It was the most serious it's ever been potentially, and it didn't obviously equate to anything, but there was at least the rumblings and the rumors this past season and in years prior of the removal of control slash the third game mode, and potentially moving to like a video system where you can either um like play a third hardpoint or a third S&D, etc. Um, I just to play devil's advocate, if anything ever happens to that, or as opposed, or just like the bigger extreme, which I definitely don't see happening due to the popularity of hardpoint, is if COD competitive ever moves to S&D only, like basically like Counter Strike without the buy system and stuff. Um, that could be when we see like a revival of what we once had in terms of an S&D scene. I don't think it'll ever get back to that point of the quote unquote glory days we had, but if S&D becomes even more important than it already is in the CDL, that might in turn lead to it, something going on in the greater COD community.
Yeah, I've kind of advocated for that for a while. Like I'd rather just have hardpoint and a search and destroy, and then say like this third game mode just get lost. Like it doesn't really like control has been very unpopular for years now.
Yep.
Basically since Black Ops 4 was like the only time that people were like, all right, I can see it. Capture the flag has been really hit or miss. I never was really a big fan of uplink, but obviously it's kind of dead in the water, like without jetpacks or like.
Yeah.
I mean, they could try. They did try with Gridiron, or whatever.
Gridiron, yep.
In World War II, but like, in Blitz, obviously, is by far the stupidest. Even though it was exciting, so I don't know.
I loved it.
Yeah, I don't know if they want to bring it back. I would hate to have been a player trying to defend the Blitz point, but yeah, there's really no good or at least consistent option for a third game mode. So yeah, I think the idea of hey, like maybe the team with the veto gets to maybe they get to pick the maps or they like get the veto advantage, but the other team gets the opportunity to say, hey, we want to play 3 hard points today instead of 3 S&Ds, and then back and forth. So I don't know if that could be an option. I think just the fact that we heard it was like at least being considered, I think that's more than we've ever heard before. So maybe we get to a point where it is actually something, or we go to like team deathmatch, and like because Halo does it, they do team slayers.
I still can't believe that.
Yeah, and that's actually really exciting too. So I don't know, like they figured it out. I think if Call of Duty was slower, then maybe they would have a chance to do it. But with how fast it goes, I couldn't imagine how quick like a LAT versus Vegas or like LAT versus Carolina TDM would be. Like it just like you talk about DoorDash, it's like 3 minutes, like like room service in a hotel or something. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's we'll see what happens with any of that, if anything happens with the game modes. Let's get into these predictions. We're approaching an hour with the show. Like we said at the beginning, this is the final week of online Call of Duty this season. Of course, there will be scrims and a lot of online matches played for sure, just unofficially in the lead up to Major 4, and then of course before Champs, and then EWC afterwards. But as far as the CDL goes, this is it. Friday, May 16th, the first match, Optic versus LAG. I believe it or not, I'm going to go with Optic Texas.
Yeah, give me Optic.
Carolina versus Minnesota. I will go with Carolina. This is a really difficult match to pick. Minnesota needs to win. Like there's like they could still make up the loss and stuff if they have a really great Major 4 performance, but Optic is playing LAG. Carolina has looked really vulnerable. If the Rocker don't win, it just makes it that much harder to make champs.
Yeah, I'm going with Minnesota. Everything we've talked about with Carolina really goes against me picking Minnesota, just in terms of talking about Carolina beating the teams below them in the standings, losing to the teams above them. Minnesota is obviously below them in the standings, but Minnesota did beat Carolina 3-1 in the losers bracket of Major 3. I believe this would have been the first match for Dylan Rex with Carolina that wasn't against LAT.
Yes, yes.
So he does have some more reps with this squad under his belt, but the fact Minnesota beat them recently and it's the same rosters, I'm going to go with Minnesota here.
And then the final match of Friday is Boston versus LAT. This is a rematch of the Major 3 winners bracket round 1 series in which Boston upset, or not Major 3, Major 2, excuse me, where Boston upset LAT and sent them down to losers bracket. I'm not going with Boston.
Oh, come on.
No. Like I maybe on land, but because LAT would probably be like the first seed, and then I'd be like, all right, like I could see it. Actually, not this time, but yeah, I just think I would not be shocked. I don't think anybody should be stunned if Boston does this because they've beaten teams that they really shouldn't have multiple times this year. I just don't think you can consistently pick them to win a match against either the best or second best team in the world.
Yeah, going with LAT. This is a pretty important match, though, for LAT.
Yeah, certainly.
In terms of trying to make sure they're in winners bracket, just because they're at 1 and 2 heading into this match, and their other opponent we'll talk about here. These are both teams that LAT they're playing at their best. They should beat them, but it's teams that have that potential to cause an upset. So I'll take LAT, but this could be a little interesting.
In addition to the Major 4 qualifier standings, I believe if LAT win both of their matches this weekend, regardless of what happens in Atlanta's only match, LAT will be the first place team heading in to Major 4. They will have first place in the overall season standings because they're currently tied with FaZe, but FaZe only has one match left in these qualifiers. So, I mean, that would feel good, I'm sure, for them. Of course, the qualifiers and making sure that they're in the winners bracket and they have like a somewhat decent seed is of the utmost importance, and very much they should focus on that. But I think it would be a pretty big accomplishment to even finish the online portion ahead of FaZe going into the major. Saturday, May 17th, speaking of Atlanta FaZe, they play the Vegas Falcons. I'm going to go with Atlanta. I don't know how much Vegas needs to win to avoid the worst record in CDL history, or if that's kind of almost a given now.
Well, it would just be that Paris team. That would have been 2023.
They won 4, I think.
Nope, not 2023. No, the Paris team won 2.
Oh, yeah. And I think Vegas has won 2.
Paris went 2-23
Yeah.
in 2022. So this team is already 2-26. So they have to win one match either in these qualifiers or at Major 4 to avoid worst record ever.
All right, so we're on history watch. So let's keep an eye on that. So Vegas versus Atlanta, who do you got?
I'll take Atlanta, please.
Okay. C9 versus LAT. Gonna go with LAT as well, but we just saw Cloud9 upset Atlanta FaZe in a match that was very unexpected. LAT has had, they haven't had a very good qualifiers here, but they've also had those moments where they just kind of lose it. Like they're, sometimes it's just I don't know, like a moment of lapsed focus or something, maybe akin to what FaZe did last week. But LAT, this is for the chance to probably get in the winners bracket and get first place in the CDL standings.
Yeah, I'm going to go with LAT as well. But like you just highlighted, I do think this is an interesting match, especially given the way C9 has looked since the roster change. And this is an important match for C9 since it is their last qualifier in terms of trying to get a winner's bracket spot and in their race for champs. In the grand scheme of things, this isn't necessarily a do or die match because whether they win or lose this match, they have to go on a very strong run at Major 4, and the 10 points aren't, they could make a big difference, but they have to go on a big run regardless at Major 4. So I'm looking at this more as just a test to really see where how this new C9 team stacks up to a team of the caliber of LAT. They definitely are going to come out firing and try to win. But I think LAT gets the job done if they're firing all cylinders. But this should be a good one.
Next up, Miami versus Carolina. I'm going to go with the Heretics. This would be for the perfect Major 4 qualifier run. Miami would go 5-0, and I don't know what the tiebreaker, how it would work out. We'd have to see with Toronto. But at worst, they would be the second seed heading into Major 4. So who do you got?
I gotta go with Miami too. I mean, we highlighted last episode and maybe 2 episodes ago just Miami's S&D record since Super joined the team. So matchup wise for Carolina, who is another strong S&D team, it's tough on paper there if they're both good S&D teams, and Miami's playing better in S&D, I would say right now. Maybe Carolina is able to steal the hard points, but Carolina has been up and down in hard points, so. This could come down to a game 5. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think Miami gets the job done.
Yeah, I think the fact that Miami's like weak point is their hard point, and Carolina, their weakest point so far with this new roster has been their hard point. I think that just does not bode well for the Ravens. Yep. And then the final match on Saturday is Toronto versus Vancouver, which is honestly a banger of a match. I'd love to see if Vancouver can make that rebound. And then, of course, for Toronto, this is one of two big matches this week. And if they're able to win both, then they would either be the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed at Major 4. I'm going to go with Vancouver, but this is by no means like a confident pick, which is how kind of inconsistent the Surge looked over the past few weeks and how good Toronto has looked.
Yeah, I'm taking Vancouver too, but this should be another really good matchup. And again, similar to LAT, just given Vancouver's record in these qualifiers, this is a big match for their aspirations of starting in winners bracket at Major 4.
The final day of the final week of online COD, Sunday, May 18th, starts off with
Preston Byers Bowl.
Yeah, I'm gonna be wearing. I don't have any breach gear, but my heart bleeds green right now. Boston versus LAG. Obviously, we just noted LAG, or I think we should note LAG is 4-24. We're both predicting them to lose the first match of this week against Optic, which put them at 4-25. Obviously, another loss here would keep them at 4 wins. I don't foresee them winning at Major 4. I believe the Boston Breach won 5 matches last season. 6. So they're on pace to be probably the 3rd worst team in CDL history behind the Paris Legion team you just mentioned and this year's Vegas Falcons team. So we're on history watch again, even though 3rd is not necessarily as great, but still, I'm going to go with Boston. But yeah, if Boston loses this is really embarrassing.
I really want to go. I can't do it. I must pick with Boston. I mean, if LAG is going to win a match, I think this is one where they could get the job done. But it's definitely, I don't know. I think Boston's a better team, so I'm just sticking with them. I'm not going to overthink it.
And we should also note that 5 teams are currently 1-2 in the Major 4 qualifier standings, and Boston is one of those teams. Like they play LAT, who is another one of those teams. We're both expecting them to lose to LAT. C9 is 2-2. They could very easily drop down to 2-3. So Boston really does need a win here. I mean, unless they beat LAT, then it's like, all right, that helps out a lot. But I don't think they're going to get into the winners bracket even on a tiebreaker at 1-4. So they definitely need one of these matches to at least have a chance at winners bracket, which would go a long way. They're not really in danger of not making champs, but they could theoretically get jumped by Optic for 7th place if Optic continues to do well. Boston kind of slumps at the very end, but so Boston probably definitely needs to win this match against LAG. Speaking of Optic, they play in the next match against the Toronto Ultra. So a pretty tough week for Toronto if Optic is supposedly good. Like we don't really know. obviously lost one match last week. They won the second match with Mercules. Maybe another week of practice will have helped this team kind of come along. I'm going to go with the Toronto Ultra, but Mercules looked really good in his first week. If he's able to get a little more comfortable with this team and they're able to get a little more comfortable with him, I think the green wall will be kind of like really pumped up going into Major 4 if they're able to win this match.
I'm all in on Mercules, so give me Optic here. I don't really consider this a revenge match just due to the circumstances of Mercules' brief stint with Toronto, but it is interesting in the sense of Mercules playing against Beans, the guy who, he filled in for due to his issues and stuff. So if, Mercules comes out and drops a 1.8 on Beans' head, there might be some good memes and stuff on the timeline. So that's what I'm rooting for. I think this should be a really good matchup and a good test to see where Optic sits right now with Mercules in the lineup. So give me Optic here.
And then the final match of the online portion of the season is Vancouver versus Minnesota. I'm obviously going to go with Vancouver.
Yeah.
But again, Minnesota really needs a win here.
I mean, yeah, it's a very tough match for Minnesota. I'm going to go with Vancouver too, but similar to, I believe, last week with Minnesota playing after Optic lost, I think last Friday. I'll just go back in the notes and look. This is an opportunity. Yeah. So Optic played Boston last Friday. Boston won 3-2. Oh, it was Cloud9. Cloud9 then beat Atlanta after that, and that was a big, combo of their win plus Optic's loss helping in their champs race. So this is an opportunity for Minnesota to do the same thing, right? Because Minnesota versus Vancouver is kind of similar to C9 versus Atlanta. We're both picking in Vancouver here. We both picked Atlanta there. But Minnesota's season's on the line, and regardless of who's put in front of them, they got to come out firing if they're going to make something happen. I think with the Minnesota team, it's kind of similar to that Carolina-Miami matchup we talked about, where I think this Minnesota team excels when their Slayers are all playing well, and that obviously translates to hardpoint success. But Vancouver's been a really strong hardpoint team, so matchup wise and that sort of thing for the modes, it's not the easiest matchup on paper. But we've seen a ton of game 5s from Minnesota. Wouldn't be surprised we see another one here to end the online season. I can't think of it would probably suck for Minnesota, but a game 5 round 11 Vancouver win to end the online 2025 season. I'm not ruling it out.
Another thing to at least mention in regards to Vancouver is they are 30 points behind Toronto for third place. Those teams play on Saturday, so if Vancouver were to win that match, they would only be 20 points behind Toronto. If Toronto does end up losing to Optic, like you think, and then Vancouver wins this final match, they would only be 10 points behind Toronto heading in to Major 4. That could be pretty significant because right now the Miami Heretics are the fifth place team, so the fourth place team would play them at champs. Miami has looked pretty damn good. The sixth place team is the Carolina Royal Ravens, and they have not looked good at all. So that could be, I don't think it'll be a factor in terms of motivation because I think both these teams are going to be sufficiently motivated. But I do think that's something to just keep an eye on as you're watching these matches, and obviously once we get to Major 4. The Pick'em this season, 135-75 is your record. I am 138-72, so a 3-match difference as we get toward the end of the season. And we will be back on Sunday, May 18th to talk about all of these matches and whatever else may have happened around the Call of Duty esports space in that time. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the podcast feeds wherever you're listening or watching on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and help us boost up those numbers. And you can also, if you are interested in watching the live stream, you can do that on YouTube, or you can go to twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. You can also follow Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2Ks. You can also follow us on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. Again, we will be back on Sunday night to talk about the matches and kind of wrap up this online portion of the season. And then next week, next Wednesday, most likely, we will be talking about Major 4, giving our preview shows, which we've both admitted that they are some of our favorite shows to talk about and to do. So, we're getting close. We're getting close to the end of the regular season. We'll be talking, I'm sure, a lot about the standings after this week's matches, because then there's only one more opportunity for these teams to earn points and improve, or really screw up their seasons and their chances at making it to champs. That does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys, as always, for all the support. Like Preston literally just said, coming up on the end of the online season, so I'm not going to thank you yet. I'll thank you next episode for being here for this whole journey of the online portion of the league. But we do still have that preview show coming up on Sunday, and or actually the preview show will be next week on Wednesday in full. But regardless, yeah, we still got some good episodes and content planned for you guys, despite the online portion of the season officially ending in just a couple days. So we'll be here if you guys are willing to listen to us. So thank you guys as always, and we'll see you back here on Sunday.